temporary arrangement, and second, it was very narrow in terms of implementation. That is, it only covered the merchandise trade. It covered only the trade in goods. And that is the precise reason, over a period of time, again the negotiations have been conducted, as a result of which 1995 we established World Trade Organization, WTO. WTO is essentially a body against, let's say, GATT, which had a narrow coverage of only merchandise. WTO focuses on goods, services, intellectual property rights, etc. But importance of WTO was that essentially WTO would function as a place where negotiations would be conducted. All the member countries would come together, conduct negotiations, talk to each other, come to a consensus, and then implement this particular agreement or a proposal, etc. Second very important point associated with WTO was multiple agreements have been signed under WTO. For example, you have agreements such as TRIPS agreement, you have TRIMS agreement, you have GATS, you have SCM, you have agreement on agriculture, AOA, etc. So multiple agreements have been implemented. So somebody has to keep a watch, review whether the member countries are adopting, implementing these agreements correctly or not. So the second very important function was essentially review of the policies or the measures which have been undertaken by the respective members under WTO. And the third very important function of WTO, or the objective of WTO, was to ensure if there is any dispute. Let's say USA has a dispute with India, again in context of trade, in context of goods, services, etc. If India has a dispute with UK, if India has a trade dispute with Brazil, etc., to address, to resolve the trade disputes, we had a proposal, we set up a body under World Trade Organization. Please remember, amongst multiple functions which are carried out by WTO, the most important functions are these three. Now, why is there a lot of discussion regarding whether WTO is operational today or not, whether WTO is effective or not? Let's understand when you look at what has a WTO done or achieved under these three functions. The first one, negotiations. Has there been negotiations being conducted under WTO by the member countries in recent times? Yes. Every often you will come across the concept of ministerial conference. Ministerial conference. So during the ministerial conference, the member countries do come together, conduct negotiations, talk to each other. But what was the latest or what was the biggest outcome of these trade negotiations or the ministerial conference in the last 1 decade? Can you pinpoint and say, sir, these are the achievements of these negotiations in the last 1 decade, last 1.5 decade, etc.? Argument is, post 2001, after the Doha conference, the argument is there has been not much achieved by the ministerial conference. Yes, every now and then when the ministerial conference is conducted, generally after 2 years, there are a lot of issues which are taken up for discussion. It could be fishery subsidy, it could be, right, let's say food security, it could be associated with tariffs on, let's say, IT products, etc. But the problem is, whatever is discussed, there is no there is no consensus amongst the member countries. And because there is no consensus, essentially it will lead to no positive outcomes or no big, let's say, agreements which have been signed by the ministerial conference, which has been implemented by WTO in the last 2.5 decades. So one of the biggest problems why there is opposition, especially by USA, is that WTO is a place of negotiation. But what has been the outcome? There has not been any such big outcomes which we can be happy with in the last 2 decades.
अरे भाई जाने दो,
USA simply argues that
बहुत ट्रैफिक रहता है सर
when we had negotiations with the countries under the WTO, we agreed that we will reduce the tariffs. Understand this very carefully. USA, especially developed countries, agreed that they will reduce the tariffs. And the technical term here is, please make a note of this. There is a term called as bound tariff. What is the meaning of a bound tariff? Let me give you one example, automatically you will understand it. Why is that India is imposing, let's say, 100% tariff or 70% or 80% tariff on some of the products? And why is that USA until now was imposing tariffs in the range of 10%, 8%, 12%, etc.? Reason is the member countries under WTO basically come under certain regulations. They will basically guarantee WTO that we are not going to impose a tariff beyond this particular percent, and that is called as a bound tariff. So historically, USA and other developed countries have basically communicated to WTO and other member countries that their bound tariffs will be much lower, and they expected that other countries will follow the same thing and provide benefit to USA for a longer period. But USA now says this has not been reciprocated by other member countries, and that is a precise reason USA says I do not have the confidence on the functioning of WTO. Right. Next point, there is a concept of consensus. Correct? There is a concept of consensus under WTO, which means whenever anything important has to be passed by the WTO, agreement has to be signed by the WTO, all the member countries should agree to it. Many experts argue that one of the biggest hurdles in terms of WTO functioning is the principle of consensus. Because we are not able to get the consensus from all the member countries, many of the, let's say, functions of WTO are affected. And USA is also basically focused on